Huck Finn, chapters 39 and 40. The setting of chapter 39 is the Phelps plantation. The major characters are Huck, Tom, Jim, Aunt Sally, and Uncle Silas. And the one minor character is little Thomas Phelps. In chapter 39, Huck and Tom continue their preparations for Jim's escape. Tom has the idea to introduce a variety of critters to Jim's hut for him to befriend. He does this because Tom wants the story of Jim's imprisonment and escape to be just like the books Tom reads. Huck and Tom begin gathering spiders, rats, and snakes. They put the snakes in a burlap sack and stupidly leave it untied and unattended in the house. Little Thomas Phelps finds the sack and accidentally lets the snakes loose around the house, putting Aunt Sally on edge and getting her annoyed at the boys. Eventually, the snakes all find their way out of the house. 3 weeks later, everything is in place for Huck and Tom to break Jim out of the hut. They had sawed the leg off of Jim's bed so that Jim was free of the chain. In order to hide the evidence, Huck and Tom and Jim eat up the sawdust, and they all get terrible stomach aches. Meanwhile, Uncle Silas has been writing letters to the owner of Jim in the plantation south of New Orleans that he heard about from the king, to tell them that Jim is being held at their plantation. Getting no replies because none such farm exists, he starts to advertise Jim to New Orleans and St. Louis newspapers. Knowing that Miss Watson might find out about Jim in St. Louis newspapers, Huck realizes that he and Tom are running out of time. While Huck realizes the urgency of this situation, Tom has the idea to write an anonymous letter to the Phelpses, warning them that a gang of cutthroats is going to try to steal Jim. It's at this point that it becomes clear that while Huck is concerned with saving Jim, Tom is just playing a game. Tom also decides that Huck needs to disguise himself as a servant girl in order to slide the note under the Phelps' door, even though no one will see him do it anyway. Next, the boys draw a skull and crossbones in blood on the front of the house, followed by a blood drawing of a coffin on the back door. Lastly, Tom writes a letter of a detailed account of their escape plan to the Phelpses. He tells them exact plans for movement and exact time frames of their escape plan, which makes absolutely no sense to Huck, because he realizes that this will severely jeopardize the success of their escape. The ominous warnings put the Phelpses, especially Aunt Sally, on edge, only serving to lessen the chances of success for the boys' plan even further. Huck notices that all the nonsense Tom is busy with is completely pointless and doesn't help them with their plan at all. The setting of chapter 40 is once again the Phelps plantation. The major characters are the same, and the minor characters are a group of 15 local farmers. As chapter 40 begins, Aunt Sally and Uncle Silas are afraid of the impending danger after reading Tom's fake letter about the gang coming to steal Jim that night. Tom and Huck steal a dress from Aunt Sally in order to disguise Jim as a woman and evade suspicion while they make their escape. After dinner, Tom and Huck are sent straight to bed. They prepare a lunch for Jim for the next day. While Huck is in the middle of stealing butter, he runs into Aunt Sally, who is suspicious about what he's doing out of bed. Using his distinguished, quick thinking, and decision-making skills, Huck decides to hide the butter under his hat. Aunt Sally brings Huck to her sitting room for further questioning. Huck is surprised to meet 15 farmers with guns already in the sitting room. While Aunt Sally is questioning him, the butter in Huck's mat begins to melt. When she notices this, She exclaims that Huck has brain fever and that his insides are leaking out of his head. She snatches the hat off his head and notices the melting butter, and she sends him off to bed. Huck quickly escapes out of his bedroom window and hurries down to Jim's hut, where he meets Tom, who has everything ready for the escape. Earlier, Tom and Jim cut a hole in the side of the hut so they could slip away. As the three are making final preparations, they are surrounded by the farmers and their dogs. All three manage to slip quietly through the hole without alarming the farmers, but as they make the last step and jump over the Phelps' fence, Tom's pant leg gets caught on a nail. It makes a loud ripping sound, alerting the farmers, who begin to shoot their guns wildly. The three make it down to Huck's canoe, which is docked in the nearby river. It's not until they get to the canoe that Huck and Jim discover that Tom was shot in the leg. Oddly, but characteristically, Tom is thrilled. In his mind, having a bullet wound denotes incredible adventure prowess and heroism. Jim and Huck quickly bandage up the wound, but they know that escape is all but impossible while Tom has a wounded leg. Huck and Jim consult in the wigwam. Jim says that if Tom were being set free and Jim got shot, Tom would make sure that Jim was safe and healthy before worrying about his own freedom. This means that Jim is more worried about Tom seeing a doctor than his own escape. Huck then says that Jim saying this shows that he is truly white inside, because only a white person would say something that compassionate. Chapter 40 closes with Huck going off to find a doctor to bring to the canoe so he can tend to Tom's wound.